Hello and welcome back to the All Sports Podcast, the podcast that tries to keep you up to date with all the biggest news in the sports world over the past week. Our first story today is the Euro 2021 has officially kicked off today with Italy beating Turkey 3-0 in the first game of the tournament. Then we're going to move on to follow up on the Logan Paul Floyd Mayweather fight. It happened, and it was absolutely as terrible as everyone expected. It went all 8 rounds. There was no winner. There's a little controversy where people thought that Floyd may have knocked out Logan Paul and kept him up, but obviously we'll never know if that's for sure. Logan Paul says it didn't happen. So we just have to move on and accept the fact that we got sold an awful fight. Well, didn't get sold, or at least I didn't pay for it. I feel bad for anyone who paid all the money to watch the fight, especially in person, and saw that instead. Saw that absolute garbage show instead. Now we're going to move on to one of the biggest stories in football this week. We had Kareem Jackson saying that Deshaun Watson of the Houston Houston Texans, Jesus, sorry, he wants to be a Denver Bronco. And obviously we've known for a very long time that Deshaun Watson is not happy in Houston. It came up publicly many a times last year with the hiring of the coach, and he wanted input. He was told he was going to get input, and then they didn't listen to him at all. So it's the writing's been written on the wall for a long time with Deshaun Watson in Houston, and Houston honestly is like, no, I'm not blaming Deshaun at all for this. I think he should want to leave, especially after seeing Julio last week be able to just say, hey, I'm not coming back for Atlanta, and Atlanta had to trade him. So according to Kareem Jackson, who obviously played with Deshaun in Texas, apparently he wants to be a Bronco, and we'll see what happens with that. With hockey this week, we had Brad Larsen being named head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Obviously, it was announced, I think, right after the season ended, first couple days after the season ended, that Torts would not be brought back in Columbus, which rightfully so, in my opinion. I think that ship had sailed. Torts had lost the dressing room a little bit, and the players just didn't want to play for him, and it seemed like maybe part of the reason why Columbus was struggling to re-sign players was because people didn't want to play for Torts. As well as in hockey, we've officially finished the second round. We have our Final Four. The first game of the Final Four will be Montreal versus Vegas, Sunday at 3 p.m., and then on Monday, you can catch Tampa versus the Islanders. So fun Final Four. Really excited to see what happens there. Now on to basketball. It was officially announced this week that Nikola Jokic has won the NBA MVP. It's great. That's great news, seeing probably the best, definitely the best center in the game right now. I mean, there's obviously questions between him and Embiid in Philadelphia, but I think Jokic is just a step above every other big man in the league, and he had an incredible season. I mean, it was pretty clear that Jokic was going to win MVP for the last few months here, so just great to see him actually win it. And then kind of really interesting story of this whole baseball season, as well as last few seasons, if you're a fan of Trevor Bauer or just kind of the inside track on baseball pitching, you know about baseball's foreign substance problem. Basically, right now, pitchers are using sticky things, whether that's back in the day, some pitchers would use pine tar. A very common one is sunscreen and rosin, as well as now you're hearing about pitchers using things called spider tack, which is a substance used for lifting those 400-pound stones in like powerlifting, for not losing your grip on that. Apparently pitchers are using that, as well as big one is pitchers making their own substance that's extremely sticky to increase spin rate on the baseball. And basically what spin rate does, it's measured in RPMs, rotations per minute, and it's how many times that baseball spins on its way, like from leaving the fingertips of the pitcher to getting in the catcher's hand, how many times that baseball spins around. And basically the more spins it can get, the higher RPM it has, the more movement you'll see on the pitches, the nastier it'll get. A really big kind of a really big person talking about this has been Trevor Bauer, who has been all about this for the last 2 or 3 seasons, talking about how when Garrett Cole moved to Houston, his RPMs, his spin rate went through the roof. And basically, I should clarify, spin rate is extremely difficult to increase without just straight up throwing the baseball faster. So it's extremely suspicious when you see pitchers have the same, or pretty much the same speeds that they use to throw, but their RPM, their spin rate, is through the roof. So basically, Trevor Bauer said that, or he tweeted saying that once Cole signed in Houston, his spin rates were through the roof, basically, and he tweeted out saying that Houston's pitching coach had taught him when he was 14 some substance that you can make in a Coke can that he used to increase spin rate. Basically, put it on his fingers so he can get a higher spin rate and get his pitches nastier. And right now we're in an extremely pitcher dominant season. The league, I think, is batting .230 right now, which is really, really low compared to like previous league-wide averages. And pitchers are both throwing the nastiest pitches we've ever seen, as well as throwing as fast as we've ever seen. So there's a lot of players are pissed, saying like this is cheating. You had Trevor Bauer say, "Hey, these foreign substances are more effective than steroids are for pitchers." And we even saw Trevor Bauer last in 2020 not openly say that he was using it, but very, like, he implied it, as well as he said, just like, look at his baseball savant, and you can see he's increased his spin rate by almost 600 RPMs. So from 2019 to 2020 and 2021, it's absolutely insane the amount of increase he got over that offseason. A lot of people think that the reason that 600 RPM boost is what won him his Cy Young last year, as well as the reason that the Dodgers are making him the highest paid player per year ever in baseball, is because, not just because he won a Cy Young, he's a great pitcher, but also because they want access to his kind of secret formula that he uses to get his spin rate up, his foreign substance that he uses. And Trevor Bauer's been very public about this. There's videos of him in warm-ups in shorts and a t-shirt, literally with his tin in his pocket. He just pulls it out in front of cameras, puts it on his fingers. He's extremely open about the fact that he's using this and that other players are using this. And earlier in the year, MLB said that we're going to start taking balls and we're going to start analyzing them, but also told pitchers and managers, don't worry, no one's actually going to get suspended. We're just going to look at the ball. And there's questions over whether the MLB was going to come to a unified, like maybe they were going to look at it and they were going to make one thing equal, an equal substance that all pitchers got to use that was legal, so that certain pitchers wouldn't have extreme advantages. Because right now, obviously, pitchers can have rosin, and rosin is really effective when you've got a sweaty hand, when there's a lot of moisture. it becomes really, really effective for getting good grip. But when it's cold, the rosin actually does the opposite. It just dries your hand right up, and you almost get like a little chalky feel on your hand, and it's not great. But basically, pitchers are using this foreign substance to just absolutely dominate this season, and hitters are pissed because right now hitters are getting hit at an extreme level. We saw Kevin Pillar take a fastball. I think it was 97 miles per hour right on the nose, and you can see him now. His nose is still broken in two places. I think he went up to bat on his first game back with a bat that had blood on it to kind of signify, like, as a sign to the pitchers. As well as we saw Harper got hit in the face earlier. Trout's been hit already. Mookie's been hit already. Like, pitchers are throwing as fast as they ever have. They're throwing extremely nasty. They're only thinking about velo, swing and miss, and they're kind of not being as caught. Like, there's not as much control on these baseballs when you're throwing them this fast, and you're seeing a lot of hitters getting hit already, and that's dangerous, especially like right now. That's super dangerous, especially with how fast these guys are throwing. Thankfully, we haven't seen any players have like career-ending injuries yet from this, but it feels like that might be the next step. Is that we might have players getting injured and having their careers end seriously premature because they caught a fastball, like a 100-mile-per-hour fastball to the face. So basically, where this got very interesting earlier this week was Garrett Cole was asked straight up in the media, has he ever used spider tack before to get an advantage, like to get better grip on the ball? And he said a lot of words, like he did my favorite thing. He said a lot of words that mean nothing. But in turn, since he refused to kind of answer the question, he instead just looks like, yes, he is using it. He couldn't just straight up come out and say, yeah, I use spider tack, because then he gets suspended, he get fined. But he couldn't say no, because if he said no, then it comes out in the future that he is using foreign substance, especially if it is spider tack. Well, then he looks awful as well. So he was kind of in a difficult situation where he just kind of said a whole lot of nothing. He said he doesn't know if he can answer that question right now, which really feels like, yes, Garrett Cole is using spider tack, but everyone kind of knows that Garrett Cole's using this foreign substance, whether it's spider tack or his own formula. It's the most public secret in baseball that Garrett Cole's one of the pitchers who's using. He's not the only pitcher. I'd say if you've got your 5 starting pitchers, I would assume probably around 4 of those guys, 3 to 4 of those pitchers on each team is probably using. And we saw this week the just MLB, say that they were going to start coming down a little harder on players who get fined by it, like get found out using foreign substance, and they were threatening 10-game suspensions. So we saw a huge drop in spin rates from guys. We saw Trevor Bauer go down. We saw Garrett Cole was really down. I think Hyun-Jin Ryu was down. Just tons and tons of pitchers were down on spin rate when they announced that they were going to actually start getting away, or they didn't announce it, but they were kind of told. Allegedly they told pitchers and they told managers that it was going to be a 10-game suspension, and umps were going to be allowed to call out any players that they thought were suspicious. And if they found it, then 10 games. So spin rate went went really far down for the week, back to where we were seeing them closer in 2018, 2017. But then we had it. No one was there were still a few guys who clearly had, who didn't have a drop, and no one got suspended. So we're starting to see spin rates go back up. So we're just assuming that MLB just isn't enforcing this rule. It's something they said they would, but the umpires just are not, they don't want to deal with that. Outside of, we had one umpire, I'm forgetting the player's name, but he basically confiscated a player's hat. He didn't give him a suspension or anything. He confiscated his hat before he even threw a pitch because he thought there might be something on the hat, and he said it would be easier to just deal with it now. So he had the player get a new hat. So that's the kind of state of the whole disciplining it right now. But there's also lots of questions about, obviously, when we talk about pitchers being as effective as they've ever been, you look to Jacob deGrom, who's the best pitcher on the planet and who's on a completely different level than any other pitcher in the MLB right now. And people instantly started assuming, Jacob deGrom must be using this stuff because he's so incredible. And there's video, if you watch Jacob deGrom, between every pitch, he touches his belt, he touches his hat, and both belt, hat are two very common places where pitchers will hide their substances. The most typical places you'll see is belt, hat, inside thumb of the glove, pinky finger of the glove. Those are the most common places where you'll see players trying to hide substances. But you can actually go back all the way to, I think, in 2015 when deGrom was drafted. Or sorry, it might have been 2014 when deGrom made his MLB debut. And he's been doing that, touching his belt, touching his hat between every pitch, literally since he was first drafted. And if you go to Baseball Savant, which is basically, if you don't know, a website that tracks every single pitch that was thrown in every single MLB game, and you can see spin rate, you can see exit velo, you can see probability of hits. It's a great website. Absolutely incredible. But you can see deGrom, with the exception of 2020, the shortened season, has never been a really high spin rate guy. He's always been in kind of the 60th percentile on his fastball. As well as, even if deGrom was, even if he was using the kind of, whether it's spider tack or his own kind of formula, he would not get the same kind of advantages as other players, because spin rate is more effective with slower pitches and with breaking pitches. And anyone who knows deGrom knows deGrom's most effective weapon is his four-seam fastball, which hits triple digits consistently. He throws probably the hardest fastball at any starting pitcher consistently in the MLB right now. And he's only thrown 3 curveballs all year. Sure, you could point to his slider would get a real big boost from this kind of foreign substance, but it doesn't look like he's in a crazy realm of RPMs for his slider compared to other pitchers, and he hasn't had a huge jump. So I personally, because of all that, don't think that deGrom is actually using anything in the same way that we know that Trevor Bauer and Garrett Cole and guys like that are using. I think he's just naturally that great of a pitcher. And we had all the New York Mets earlier this week on Twitter defending Jacob deGrom, and they were all tweeting out that they would put their paycheck on the line, saying that they swear to God Jacob deGrom is just that great. He doesn't use anything. And these are, I mean, there's videos you can see. Lots of people think that Marcus Stroman is a guy who uses the sticky substances, and he was one of the guys who came to deGrom's defense, saying no, the deGrom is completely substance free. As well as Pete Alonso, star first baseman for the New York Mets, was asked about how he feels about pitchers using foreign substances. And he said that he was actually okay with pitchers using foreign substances if it's for grip on the baseball, if it's for having better control, which right now it doesn't seem like that's what pitchers are really using the foreign substances for. It feels like they're more using it as a way to get higher or what's it called, like more breaks on their pitches. Higher spin rate for just throwing nastier pitches, instead of using it for control, like has been said it's been said for forever and ever and ever that players were okay with pitchers using things on their hand to get a better grip because, they want to make sure they're not hitting batters, but clearly batters are getting hit at a record rate right now, and pitches are as fast as they've ever been. But either way, the bigger story from this was Pete Alonso, after being asked about this, he said that he thinks MLB is at fault here, and not just for not enforcing this rule about about using foreign substances. He said that the reason that pitchers are all using these foreign substances is because MLB is intentionally changing the ball so much. Because as you know, MLB a few years ago bought Rawlings so they could have full control over what the MLB's ball is and what it's like. And we saw in 2019 the juiced baseball. I mean, they lowered the seam so it was more aerodynamic, and that ball was absolutely flying. We were destroying league-wide home run rates. And he said the reason the MLB did that was because they saw that 2019 had a ton of pitchers as unrestricted free agents, and MLB said, well, we're going to use the juice baseball to try to lower how much pitchers will be able to make in the offseason because they're just not going to be performing as well. And that's why pitchers started to use the sticky stuff to try to get an advantage back, as well as now we're using, in 2021, we're using the deadened baseball, and you're seeing the lowest batting average league-wide in forever. And there are tons and tons and tons of hitters up as UFAs this offseason. So Pete Alonso actually believes the MLB is intentionally changing the ball, and whether using the juice baseball or using this year's deadened baseball to try to keep cost of players down. And he was really upset about that. So that's why he believes pitchers started using foreign substances to get grip on the baseballs and get higher spin rates. So he doesn't blame pitchers at all. He's fully blaming the MLB and feels that the MLB is kind of cheating their players by doing this. And if it's definitely, it's a wild, you hear it and it's a wild conspiracy on when you just first hear it. But the more you sit and think about it, the more it kind of makes sense, especially now with 2021 when teams are struggling for money after the pandemic. They maybe don't want to pay players as much. Maybe the MLB goes, hey, why don't we use the deadened baseball now to lower? I think it's a harder sell saying that they switched to the juice baseball because there are so many pitchers up for contracts. I think it's easier to just point and say MLB wanted higher ratings and looked at when was the ratings the highest, when the steroid era was king, and we had guys like Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa do those crazy home run chases. So they then used the juice baseball for that to kind of increase home run rates league-wide and try to get some more excitement going on. But now maybe it is a little more believable that the deadened baseball is being used to keep costs down. I don't know. I don't fully know where I sit on that topic. I think I'm kind of leaning towards not fully agreeing with Pete Alonso on this, but I can fully see from his perspective as an MLB hitter and as an elite MLB hitter why he would think that this is what's going on. Either way, thank you for listening to another episode of the All Sports Podcast. It's been a lot of fun. I'll catch you guys on Sunday for the Sunday show, and peace and love.